6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." When the great crowd of the Jews learnt that he was there, they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and were believing in Jesus.
So, how do we respond to this reading? What do we do with Jesus' question, comment that you will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me? How does that make you react? My name's Tim Baker. I'm the Churches and Volunteers Manager at All We Can, which means I lead on how All We Can, the Methodist Church's international development agency, how we relate to Methodist churches here in the UK, helping to tell some of those amazing stories of lives being changed around the world due to All We Can's work and the way that the whole All We Can movement helps to make a difference. At All We Can, we wrestle with this line. Is it a universal truth that we will always have the poor with us? Or is Jesus talking to the disciples about their own time? Is this context bound? Is this somehow an instruction to us to spend less time focusing on tackling poverty and more time on worshipping Jesus? Is it an encouragement to spend money on worship rather than justice? But how can it? How does that sit with you? How does it sit with the rest of Jesus' ministry? I remember as a young local preacher in training, turning up to preach at a church for the first time, and someone asking me, "Will you be preaching the social gospel today, Tim?" And the only reply I could think of was, "Is there any other kind of gospel?" Throughout Jesus' life and ministry, and throughout my own walk with Jesus and learning what it is to follow him, I have seen social justice as such a key theme. Responding to injustice, helping to tackle poverty. I've committed my life to seeking that work to be fulfilled, to seeking the ways that the church can be a part of tackling justice and inequality, and that's why I'm delighted to work at All We Can and be a part of that movement of people making a difference. In that work and in seeking to fulfil that work, I often look to Teresa of Avilad's take on the famous kind of commandment, love God and love your neighbour. Because what Teresa of Avilad says about that is of course, love God comes first in that sentence, but also, how do you know that you're loving God? How do you judge how that's going for you? But you do know how you're loving your neighbour. Here in my neighbourhood, I know how I'm loving my neighbour. I know what that looks like. Human to human relationships, being kind, being generous, being gracious, making space for others. You always know if you're loving your neighbour. Do we know what it looks like to love God? So sometimes in this reading, in this famous and challenging passage, I sympathise with Judas's position. What a waste! We could have done so much good with the money raised from that perfume. Of course, I never sympathise with his stealing and embezzlement of charitable funds. And sadly, the history of trying to do good works is full of people who have also been trying to manipulate those good works for their own gain and enrichment. And we need to hold that to account today. So I sometimes sympathise with Judas and his desire to see justice done. But today, and leaning on all my experience working for All We Can, I'm challenged again to see it as a little bit more complicated than that. Because it's our worship that invites us to change the world. It's our love for Jesus and God's love for us that moves us to pursue social justice. In this story, Judas is too motivated by the calculating spreadsheets and statistics. He's also motivated by his own greed, of course, and not enough by a simple expression of worship. Because worship and justice can't be split apart. You can't prioritise one over the other. They're entwined together. It's our desire to worship a loving God whose desire is for the whole world to hold together in justice and love and peace and harmony that feeds into our desire to be part of that story of unity. We worship an incredible God, and from that position of worship are motivated to give, to act, to respond, to volunteer, to change our own lifestyle. Today, at the beginning of Holy Week, will you worship Jesus with me? We don't know quite what that looks like, as Teresa of Avila challenges us to, but we do know how we might express it. We do know how it might pour out of us. Let's start with worship, start with prayer, start with love, and out of that, the flow of justice, the desire to change the world, will pour out. Let's take that challenge together and be part of a movement of change, inspired by love, motivated to action. God bless you, and take care.